Johnson.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Welcome to this, our last session for this year's Innotribe. This year has been outstanding, so thank you to all of you. But before we get to the end, before we go off to see the closing plenary, we've got a few more people that we'd like to hear from. Last year in Geneva, on the last day of Cybos, our Chief Marketing Officer opened up Innotribe with a series we called View from the Top. And we'd like to welcome him to come back up again to give his views, not only on Cybos, but looking forward on this, our future day. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage the Chief Marketing Officer of Swift, Christian Serafidis, to give us some more views from the top. Christian?
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. I thought I would share some thought with you. At the end of the day, what is a success? Amber, you would agree with me? This is also what you said earlier in the big issue debate, actually. If you think about what Swift is, or Innotribe in general, that's all about this. We are building platform, we add value, and we try to enhance the customer experience. And we do it in a collaborative way. And the more we do it in a collaborative way, the most impactful it is for the customer experience. And I thought, oh, Christian, can you think about an analogy to reflect on this? And I came with this. Do you remember this? Who knows what that is? Pong. Who played with Pong? Well, that says a lot about our age, right? This was at the time cutting-edge technology, right? I was passionate about technology, about digital ways, etc. So I played hours and hours until I was bored. Say, okay, it's always the same game, one platform. Then you had innovative guys. They came with this, another platform, but you were supposed to play alone, but you had different vendors, different games. Nintendo made this thing. It was great, enhancing the customer experience, but after a couple of hours, again, it was getting a little bit bored, right? Then the next generation was this, PlayStation or consoles that you could find. There the idea was to come up with a platform, and you had different vendors coming with different games that was even enhancing further the customer experience. This was really, really fun. But I was still playing alone, right? The next thing is this. It's more the virtualization, to have even enhanced customer experience, how to play with the whole community. And the more you were playing with the community, the more you were interconnected, the more fun. You were not even needing to have somebody physically next to you. You can play with the whole community. So, and I want to reflect, and what comes to my mind is a quote from a Swedish professor to reflect on this, and I wanted to use this with you today. Moving from ecosystem to ecosystem. That's all about this. So the more the people are interconnected, the more you do innovative collaboration, the more impactful it is for the customer experience. How does this translate for Swift and Innotribe in general? I'd like to give you two examples. The one actually related to the previous discussion here at Innotribe on cybersecurity. Think about this. Every bank are communicating to another. Everybody is interconnected. So that's a great strength because you can exchange transactions between all the banks. At the same time, there is a weakness. Imagine that there is a propagation risk of a virus or a malware. So the best way to protect the entire community is to protect yourself, obviously, but also to protect the counterparty, to detect and prevent your relationship, your counterparties, and also to share information. That's a way to together addressing this challenge. And Swift has done this, as you all know, and it was discussed in the previous debate, with a customer security program. Another great example, and that's the last one I can give because there are many more examples, is what you have heard throughout the week with GPI, the Global Payment Innovation Initiative. We really started with the pain points and the friction from the market. Clients were expecting better speed, better transparency, better traceability. And together with the banks, we co-created a new initiative built on the existing rail. We turbocharged the existing rail. We innovated together. We created a rulebook together with the banks. We invented the unique identifier and this famous tracker application. That was really great. But then, thanks to Innotribe, we said, what is the way forward? How can we really go the extra mile and add even more value to further enhance the customer experience? And we decided to run an industry challenge. We had a session this morning actually on this topic. And this is really a collaborative approach with the banks, with the fintechs, and Swift, by exposing the Swift APIs, where fintechs and banks together can add value, add application, with the aim at enhancing the end customer value proposition. So this is how I would like to conclude on this. The power of the collaborative innovation moving from ecosystem to ecosystem. I leave you with this quote, and I'd like to hand over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Christian, thank you very much. So from ego to eco. And that's what this has been all about. It's been about ecosystems. It's been about listening to people. Now, on that topic of listening to people, at the end of every Cybos, you're going to get emails about surveys and things like this, asking you what you thought about sessions, what you thought about Cybos, and giving your feedback. That does come into us, and we do actually look at this and we listen. And a couple of things really stood out last year. Last year, we had the future of money on the big issue debate stage last year, and we were fortunate enough that Amber was actually part of that. And one of those pieces of feedback came in that went, Amber Case is amazing, she should be given a session of her own. Somebody said that to me today as well, and I said, stick around. Because it gives me a great honor to bring one of the most inspiring speakers that I've seen in quite a while, and I think there's quite a few fans of her in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Amber Case. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about calm technology. But first, who's heard this quote? This quote was thrown around for a number of years, that there are going to be so many billion devices in the world, and usually it's coded in a way that's really exciting, really positive. Because there are a lot of publicly traded companies out there, and when they saw what mobile development did to their stock prices, they said, oh wow, we have to keep doing this. We have to make sure that there are more chips in the world. So let's put chips in everything. We'll call it the Internet of Things. Everything will have a chip. Everything will be smart. And we'll have 50 billion of these devices by 2020. Everything will be great. And so whenever I see these quotes, I actually ask, does this actually sound good? Let's consider a few different things. For instance, the smart watch that automatically gives you the same alerts as are on your phone, and you have to kind of figure out what you want and what you don't want. The smart fridge. There are so many clients that try to call me up and get me to make smart fridges. And some of the things are, let's have a thumbprint reader in the fridge. So when you're making food and your hands are dirty and then you go to the fridge, you have to use your thumb. I thought that once you get into your house, everything's unlocked. You don't need another layer of security to get into all of your appliances. Or a Bluetooth connected fridge. It's like, okay, so now my phone that's connected via Bluetooth to a speaker, I have to disengage that and connect it to my fridge for what? To figure out what's in the fridge? Or a fridge that tells you that on the way home you need to pick up milk and eggs. Isn't that what most people pick up at the store every time? Do I really need a piece of technology that has $2 million in funding from San Francisco to tell me that I need to pick up milk and eggs when I go to the grocery store? Plus, when you add all of these together, you get what I like to call the dystopian kitchen of the future, in which everything's connected, but it's not connected that well. It doesn't speak to each other. It's written in different programming languages. It has its own support cycle. Half of the companies will go down, and you won't have any supportable software or hardware anymore, and most of it will be hacked at some point and take over the other appliances in your house and turn your house against you. Not to mention the bandwidth that this takes up. You're trying to watch Game of Thrones, and it says, sorry, there's not enough available bandwidth. Your fridge is trying to communicate to your stove, and it's taking up all this conversational space. So I think there's even worse things that can happen. For instance, this PetNet software hardware company. There are pet feeders. How many of you have used a remote pet feeder? Like, it's just a pet timer, right? You set it on a timer, it feeds your pet at intervals. It's on a 12-hour thing. It's not a big deal. Well, this one said you never have to worry about feeding and watering your pets again, and you can check in on them because you can Skype them with our new PetNet hardware. So people bought this. What do you think happened? Everything was based on a remote server. Okay, so this failed. And the dogs and cats, I mean, really a new Schrodinger's cat happened. You didn't know whether your cat was alive or dead. You had to call up people and get them to break into your home to make sure your pets were fed. I bugged this company about that. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, we didn't implement offline support. So the first thing that you do with this company is offline support to make sure the animals are fed. Even if your power's out, it should be able to work. How do these things fail? And somebody proposed having warning stickers on Internet of Things devices at some point, because they could just hack you. Warning, Amazon Alexa, this is a listening device. Like, just a big sticker on the front of it. And then I looked at the terms of service, and it said, PetNet is not responsible for any service failures. So we promise that you never have to worry about your pet. We will go down, and we're not responsible. You're responsible. It's not a big deal. So I got really sick of this, and I said, why do we have this era of interruptive technology? It's not just what we were promised, which was technology would make things easier for you, give you more time, you would work less. We have an era where technology is constantly interrupting us, and our network connection is being interrupted, and our battery life isn't very good. What the heck happened? Like, what was the promise that we were supposed to have? Now, technology is kind of like a gas that fills every available nook and cranny of our free time. The Greeks have this concept of time, chronos time and kairos time. Chronos time is it's this kind of scheduled time, right? I have a meeting from 9 to 10 a.m. We will talk about this. This is the agenda. And then there's the kairos time, the one where you finally got on a vacation and a week in, the day before you need to leave, you finally look at that sunset and you're so relieved and you don't worry about your email anymore. And then ding, an email shows up and the chronos time interrupts your kairos time. This kairos time is the human time. It's the time outside of time. It's the lived reality. And so if we don't have as much of that anymore and we don't have as much reflective time, how are we supposed to come up with anything new or unique if all of our kairos time is infected by our chronos time, if every single alert is just interrupting us? So in an era of all this interruptive technology, I was writing my thesis in college and I said, isn't there a bunch of people somewhere in the world, somewhere in history, that tried to study this before it was a big deal? And I found these people at Xerox PARC in the 90s, and they were called Mark Weiser and John Seely Brown. And they said, okay, we're going to make a future world. We said the world is going to have pads, tabs, and boards. These are boards. You have pads and tabs in your pockets. That world that they predicted is here right now. And they realized that the scarce resource in the 21st century wouldn't be technology anymore. It would be our attention. And how technology worked with our attention would make or break the future of whatever we were trying to build. And that was absolutely crucial. And they wrote a number of papers, and they called this concept a calm technology. Mark Weiser has one of my favorite quotes. He says, we don't need smarter devices, we need smarter people. Why are we trying to make devices smart? What's the point? Like, it's right here. I mean, not all of us are that smart. It doesn't matter. It can enhance and it can augment and make us smarter, not have us take all of our interest in poetry and art and stuff it into a machine that could care less. So these are the two people. Mark Weiser died, and he's no longer around to even see the era who he coined. He coined the phrase ubiquitous computing, which we now know as IoT. And he's not around. And so when I saw this, I said, I need to bring this to the era that really needs it. And you can go back in time, and a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with right now has been there for 30 or 40 years. Early AI, booms and busts, and weird cryptocurrency type things. Like, there's been a lot of things already there, but if we don't have enough reflective time, we can't go back and look at it. And we lose millions and millions of dollars because we just don't pause and see what's already been there and what's already been done. So one of the papers they wrote is The Coming Age of Calm Technology, and then another paper called The World is Not a Desktop. In the coming age of calm technology, the whole idea was that at one point in time, we had many people sharing one computer, many people sharing one mainframe device. And then we had almost one-to-one when you had the desktop computer. And then in the future, many devices will share us. And in the world is not a desktop, they take this further because the idea is that a lot of the technology that we build today, a lot of the values that we have, are based in a desktop world. If you are on a desktop, you just sit down, there's a persistent power supply, there's persistent network capability, and you have all of your attention on this nice little box and a keyboard and a mouse, and you're sitting there. That's not the world anymore. We don't sit in front of a computer that much. We sit in front of a computer like this, mostly horizontal when we wake up in the morning. It's the first thing we see often. It cries and we pick it up and soothe it back to sleep. It gets hungry, we plug it into the wall. We often look at it before we look at our significant other, and we take care of it better than we do ourselves in some cases. Yet the world is still built as if we had lots and lots of attention, battery life, and connectivity. And we need to assume, because this is true, the world just is pretty mediocre in terms of connectivity and battery life and attention. How can we make technology that works when it fails? How do we make technology that works with limited battery life, with limited connectivity, and with limited patience? Then we make innovative technology. Then it's interesting. Then it's useful. Then it stands the test of time. But right now, we rush, and we make bloated systems that don't mean anything, that die after a few years. And we buy really expensive professional services solutions in 7-year contracts, not even knowing what we're buying, just because there's a buzzword attached, and we're fearful of some other company taking our thunder and stealing our market share, and our investors getting mad at us. We don't need to do that. We need to be able to fight back just a little bit, so we have enough time to do the right thing. So how do we actually design this calm technology? They came up with a number of principles. I have a few more principles I'll share with you, and then we'll end. The first one is that technology shouldn't require all of our attention, just some of it, and only when necessary. And the idea behind this is simply a tea kettle. With a tea kettle, you set it, you forget it. You go to another room, it calls to you when it's done. It requires the minimum amount of attention. It tells you when it's ready, it's done. It's pretty straightforward. There's a tea kettle, hooray. The next one is that technology should empower your peripheral attention. You have a lot of primary attention here, very high resolution. Secondary attention out here, you can feel haptic buzzes, you can use a pedal, you have a sense of smell, you have a sense of taste. Barely any of those senses are getting used right now, especially with new computing technologies. It's all visual-based and a little bit of touch-based, just our thumbs most of the time. So if we open up and see what can we put in our peripheral attention, we can make people pay attention to things without diverting them from their primary focus. You can still give information, you just don't have to have it as high resolution. Take the example of a car. A car is based on supporting your primary attention the entire time. So you have your primary attention on the road, your brain is loading all the variables of where the cars are and all the relative speeds, and your brain is really good at calculus, better than self-driving cars right now. And you sit there, and then you have the rear view mirror that you can glance up into to see what's there. You have the pedals, which make use of your feet. Did you know that the earliest development of the mouse actually had a foot pedal? Can you imagine how different computing would be if we were pedaling around to scroll? It would be incredible. Because it was kind of like this car-based technology. You're going to sit in front of something, you might as well operate it. And then you have tertiary attention, you have radio knobs that you can pull. And this all supports this primary focus. Yet the minute we put a phone up in front of our face, all of those variables in our primary attention drop, and they drop right into the phone. And that split second, then you're glancing back and forth to your phone, you can get in an accident. And that's the difficulty. Unless you have a projected display in your car, there's different ways to make attention work well in a car with connected technology. It's just a completely different paradigm on how to build it. This is the Lumobac Smart Posture Sensor. You wear it around your waist and it buzzes you when you need to sit up straight. You could call it like little brother technology instead of big brother. It's like personal surveillance. The opposite of surveillance is surveillance, to view from below instead of to view from above. This is a silly example, but it's about haptics, a sense of touch. I had an employee that had an insulin pump installed, and he was really excited that he would be a normal human. He'd get this insulin, and it would be totally unnoticeable. And I had a one-on-one meeting with him, and he beeped. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Insulin pump." And he said, I went to a wedding and a funeral and I beeped and they all thought I was really rude. I said, can you change the notification style to something that doesn't beep? And he said, no. And when he was in a loud concert, he would beep, but he wouldn't hear it. And he would miss the insulin injection or the refill that he needed to put in. Now, the problem was that he was given this really great life-saving technology, but he wasn't given a choice. And if you're making technology for people, give them the choice of the notification and the notification style, because you have no idea what situation they'll use it in, because there's way too many situations out there now that the world is no longer a desktop. Technology should inform and calm at the same time. There is an example of this through ambient awareness. So ambient awareness, you can put indicators into the environment. Like today, you all realized that there was going to be a show partially because of the ambient indicator signs, but also because of all this crazy lights show that was going on. It's kind of ambient awareness of something. You can do this in 4 different ways. You can buzz somebody versus an auditory alert. You can have a light status versus a full display. For instance, if I have a video camera, there's just a red light there. I know, and you know, that there's a recording happening. It's a very small light indicator. You could have that on a server, whether the server's down or not, whether there's fraud or not, whether there's too many accounts or not, whether the customer service is bad or not. You can make a simple indicator for any of this that anybody can see. And when you don't have it, like on Google Glass, there was no indicator of recording on Google Glass, so people assumed it was recording all the time because it was completely opaque. Part of this is making what was formerly invisible visible, which is a hard thing to do, but once you do it, everybody around you and you can understand and respond to things a lot faster. Instead of using a horrible disembodied voice that says, the toast is ready, you can just go ding. I mean, we learned this from home appliances, right? Like, those are pretty stable. We don't have home appliances conferences about the future of blockchain and home appliances. It's pretty stable. I hope we don't have to have blockchain and home appliances. Then you can have transparency through like inter-office windows, so you can see whether somebody's busy or not without intruding on their privacy. This is one of Mark Reiser's original examples. They had a lot of inter-office windows at Xerox PARC. Here's an example of weather status lighting with a Hue light bulb attached to a weather report. This was my old kitchen. So I lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, which is just rainy most of the time, and so this light bulb was blue. Almost every single day. It would tell me what the weather was going to be. And on this day, it was yellow, it was going to be sunny, and I was so excited. The idea here is we mostly, my co-founder and I, built this to make fun of these technology advertisements of you wake up in a perfect condo with a perfect English accent so that Siri understands you the very first time you say something. Does anybody have that experience of Siri understanding you every single time you say something? It always works in ads. So with this, all you have to do is walk in and you have an understanding of what the weather is going to be like, and then you can look at the secondary interface and get a high resolution version of the information. That's all it is. It's pretty straightforward, but it does give you this kind of sense, this kind of sixth sense, taking something that was formerly invisible and making it visible. You can do the same with temperature. This is done a lot in factories. You can just change the color of something to the temperature. It'd be nice to have a shower head like this so that it's just, you could choose whatever color of red or purple you wanted, but you know just by visual indicator what temperature it is. It's nice instead of sticking your hand constantly. I work with a company that is doing industrial IoT, which I think Internet of Things really works well at the industrial level because you can stack a bunch of sensors onto things, and then you can actually use augmented reality to look at things in real time and how they're changing. And they're on a different network than the machines, so if the IoT gets hacked, it's not hacking into the machines themselves. This is an example. If you were to have a heads-up display, you could actually see a factory and see all the issues over time and not have to worry about it as much instead of going into a very specific interface constantly and trying to look at these little tiny details. And I think that's really important. This is kind of, you can have a digital twin of something, but you can also blend reality. So instead of augmented reality, you can kind of have a mixed reality. You take the data that's associated with the machine and you place it on the machine, you place it on the software, you place it on the service, you place it back onto the reality from which it came. It's a harder thing to do, but it's really interesting. This is a really important concept when people are trying to do artificial intelligence implementation. Every time somebody tries to make a computer that acts like a human, like those phone tree systems that are really annoying with the robotic voices, people end up being on pause. People end up turning into robots themselves. You have to say something like 3 or 4 times to get it across. And it turns out that these humans act like machines the whole time. So don't do that. If you amplify the best of what humans can do, which is curation, and the best of what machines can do, which is going through lots and lots of data and finding patterns and suggesting things, the human who understands context and is a human embodied in a shape with history and identity and relation and an understanding can then choose what the right thing is from the list. The original idea of technology, especially from Doug Engelbart, was to augment us, to help us out, to work alongside us. And that's the important thing to remember. Every time somebody says, well, AI is going to take over the world and everything will be automated, I really don't want an AI running a missile silo, for instance, or because it's all hackable. And it's all hackable if humans are still managing it too. So you have to assume this stuff will be hacked and say, this is okay. A human doesn't die when it has a cold, and a machine shouldn't die either. You shouldn't have access to everything when something gets hacked, but you should expect that to happen. This is my friend Todd Huffman. He got really upset because all of these grad students in biology had to scan these tissue samples in 2 dimensions, and it just took forever, and people's arms were really tired. So he built a bot that does this tissue scanning for them in 3 dimensions with a diamond knife, and it slices and scans these tissue samples. And now the machine, through a feedback loop of doctors saying, yes, this ended up being cancer, or no, this didn't end up being cancer, is able to start predicting cancer before it shows up. This is a nice version of automation because it includes humans in the loop as a voting system. Some of the best automation or AI right now we have is about a feedback loop that has humans voting, that has tiny little micro-human input. That's how it gets to be really good and sharp, not in its own system outside of itself. It's a very industrial revolution perspective to think that you can make a machine outside of an ecosystem and it will be just fine. We don't have a world that works like that anymore. Everything is very connected, so we have to consider the ecosystem in which we put things and how those things work. Technology can communicate, but it doesn't need to speak. I hate those stupid disembodied computer voices. They're really obnoxious. What I really like is the Roomba. The Roomba robotic vacuum cleaner just goes dun 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 when it's done, and dun dun when it's stuck. And when you hear that, you're like, oh no, I have to help the Roomba. So you go find it and you pick it up. It's not trying to do everything for you. It's kind of the idea of the engineering behind it is that it's not very good at what it does, but it's kind of adorable. In fact, it doesn't actually clean any of the corners, but cats love it and they like to ride around on it in YouTube videos. But again, you don't need to translate this into a bunch of different languages because it just has a tone. And these tones of happy or sad are universal. And so when you're making something, you don't need to make this incredibly complicated situation. It's the least amount of technology to get the job done. Just finding the least amount of technology to get the job done, that's the hardest part. And that's the part that takes all of the time. And that's the part that people don't want to do. They want a really fast solution that you end up paying for millions of dollars at a time years down the road. Technology should consider social norms. Remember when the phone came out with a camera? Everybody had a cell phone, and then suddenly the camera showed up, and everybody thought privacy was dead, and this would be horrible, and we need to ban these all over the place. And now people know that when you put your phone up like this, like you can run and hide, but it's probably just a selfie, or they're taking a picture of their lunch as a pre-digestive ritual or something like that. But whatever's normal becomes invisible. We got used to it, and now every one of you in this room has a video camera in your pocket, and that's totally not a big deal, is it? Everybody has one at this point. So that's normal. Anything below that current norm, which changes all the time, is accepted. A prosthetic leg, for instance, or just a pair of eyeglasses, that's restoring you to the current norm. Right now, the current norm is to have a cell phone with a camera. In many countries, not all countries, and that's the norm. So when you're in that specific country, you are you're not doing so well if you don't have that norm. Anything above that norm is fear-inducing because not everybody has it, it's usually expensive, and it usually gives you a superpower beyond what everybody else has. So just putting a camera on your face is terrifying because people aren't used to that. And it's not that technology isn't ready for humans. Humans are usually not ready for technology. And we have to wait, and we have to say, there's kind of a metabolism rate. It's maybe about a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons before we can get each new feature out. And so to develop something like the iPhone did take at least 10 years. First you had to have the iPod, and then you had to, you can see the progression that it took. So anytime somebody says, we'll make this new thing with all these new features, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you actually find out where the social norms are. When the elevator first came out, people were afraid to ride in it because they thought that they would die from the pressure change. Same with trains. Nobody had ever been accelerated that fast before. Oh no, you could die. I mean, people, you have to kind of work with them. They're human and they're fearful, and it takes a while. This is my friend in Google Glass, which is still creepy. The right amount of tech, yeah, we'll see how long that takes. The right amount of tech is the minimum to solve the problem. These are some of my favorite technologies. Streetlights are great. Why are they calm? Because they have a status light instead of a giant display. Can you imagine making a streetlight today? It would be like some sort of app you'd have to download to sync with the traffic, and then it would give you alerts. The light is about to turn red, and countdowns, and it would speak at you in a disembodied voice. It would be horrible. But the idea behind streetlights is that they're just punctuation. They're ambient attention modules that you just kind of glide through if it's green, and you stop if it's red. It's really nice. And then the toilet occupied sign. I like to go on planes and see what doesn't change on the plane. This does not change. This indicator, even if you're red-green colorblind, it's just an icon, and it works okay. Technology should make use of the near and the far. How many of you, if you put your phone on airplane mode, can actually do anything with your phone? You could take some photos, you could take some notes. You can't really talk to that many people. A lot of the apps require a web connection. They don't have a lot of stuff stored offline. But if we have these giant computers in our pockets that are they're way better than what we had on mainframe, why aren't we doing a lot of processing on our phones? Why aren't we storing a lot of data on our phones and then sending it to an external server or database for a period of time to get something done, and then get that data stored back on our phone? Why don't we have the equivalent of personal servers? I mean, we literally have the technology in our pockets to do this. This is my prediction map of where the web might go. First, we had computing that was far away from us on mainframes, and we had many people sharing that. Then we had personal desktop. And remember when you had a personal desktop and there was no web? You could do everything there, and you just needed a printer. You had CD-ROMs, or before that, floppy disks that were finished pieces of software that would come out once a year or once every 2 years that guaranteed would work. There wasn't somebody saying, oh no, here's 20 floppy disks in the mail, install one every day for your virus update, because viruses were a completely different thing. And then we started to offload a lot of that data into remote mainframes and into the cloud. And now we're storing almost all of our stuff outside of us. The thing is, it's impossible for every single company that's a web-based company to protect all of our data, to protect our identity, to protect our privacy. In fact, wouldn't it be nice if we stored the data that was close to us with us and shared it for 4 hours or 30 minutes to get some banking done, and then it got stored back with us, so that if your banking application got hacked, it wasn't that hackers got everything, but only the stuff that was shared by people in the last 30 minutes? I mean, there's different models that we can use for this stuff. It doesn't need to be as complicated and messy as it is right now. It's just really, it takes some time. So perhaps we'll get to this point. I'd love to see that. We probably won't see it right now. Follow IPFS, Filecoin, and some of these other new things coming out of Silicon Valley. See where they go. Thought experiment. Finally, technology should work even when it fails. Assume the tech will fail. How does it perform at a bunch of different failure states? How does it perform when you have bad connectivity? How does it perform when you're out of batteries? I have a lock on my door, but it's just a key code. The battery lasts for 2 years, and when the battery is dying, for the last 40 tries that I use, it will go wee, 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 and flash everything red. And it'll do this for so long that I'll get annoyed enough and change the batteries. But at no point will I ever get locked out of my house, and it's not web connected, so nobody's going to hack it. It's just a really simple thing. There are a lot of people who try to make these phones that unlock your door with your phone. It's like, well, if I come back at 2 in the morning drunk and my phone is out of batteries, I can't get in my house just when I really need to get into my house, because they're not considering the failure state. People who assume that you can control the lights in your house through the web are probably from Silicon Valley or South Korea, where there's really good internet connection. And it's really hard because in most places in the world, you're going to have some issues with web everywhere. Well, especially now in Silicon Valley, everybody's trying to download stuff on Netflix. So you have to question what's going to happen when something fails. And then if you process as much on the device itself, you don't have to get the user interface from the web. Your application will perform better. So if good design allows you to accomplish your goals in the least amount of moves, first you have to figure out what somebody's goals are, which is a whole another issue. Then calm technology allows you to do the same thing with the least amount of mental cost. Another quote from Mark Weiser, "A person's primary task should not be computing, but being human." That was the promise of technology, to get us back to being human again, because that's the thing we don't want to automate. That's the interesting stuff. It's not that humans are bad or good, but it would be nice to have enough free time to come up with the next thing. And finally, the scarce resource is not going to be our technology, it's our attention. And how tech makes use of our attention is the crucial thing going forward. I wrote a book on this. It's on Amazon. It's called Calm Technology. I'm writing another book called Designing with Sound, how to make less annoying alerts, and how to make spaces that are not so reflective that you can't hear other people when you're trying to work at a coffee shop or trying to get anything done at your open office thing that everybody got forced to make because they thought it was cool, and nobody would work for them unless it was an open office, unfortunately. So there's also a website, calmtech.com. I put a lot of the original research and research papers from Mark Weiser and John C. Brown on there. They're really, really well written and just wonderful, wonderful to read. And they stand the test of time, even though they've been written in the late 80s to mid-90s. Incredibly clear. I don't know, I consider them works of art. So that's about it. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Before you go, there's something I've always wanted to say, he says, and it's not Innotribe. One more thing. Hey. Couple more things. I think the biggest thing I wanted to say is, this week we've had 27 sessions through Innotribe. You've seen some amazing speakers here on the stage, but that really is the tip of the iceberg. To pull this off has taken 10, 11 months of huge numbers of people's time. I turned up here in the space on Thursday, and it was already half built. By Saturday, there were over 60 builders on stage building this physical space. To put this program together, to do the support material, to do the slides that you've seen, to do the sound, to do the video, to do the support outside, to do the scribing that's everywhere, to do the Innotribe magazine, to do all of this has taken a small army. It's my pleasure and privilege to stand up here, but I really cannot take the credit for what everybody's done. So I'd like you all to stand up and give a huge round of applause to everybody who's been involved, speakers, staff, George B. Johnson, Collective Next. Guys. It has been a huge privilege to do this. From me and the team to Christian to your management team, thank you so much for giving me the trust to do this. This is the first time I've had the privilege of sharing this with you. So the last thing I will say is please go to the closing plenary, listen to Satya, and we will see you all next year in Sydney. Thank you very much, and good night.